And now there's a plane that's in the way of this video happening. Okay guys, we have another week of Broadway grosses, so let's get into it. Up first we have & Juliet, and that went from 95% to 92%, and $1,223,471 to $1,199,037 this week. And again, it's doing exceptionally well. So again, nothing really to say about that other than that it is doing absolutely fine. A Beautiful Noise went from 83% to 72%, and $1,209,118 to $997K, a $211,841 drop. A Beautiful Noise, you know, this was a good week for A Beautiful Noise, but these huge decreases from one week to the next is not good. And if it does this consistently, it can be a reason why a show closes. And again, A Beautiful Noise has not had consistent business, even though it's, you know, managed to survive not closing at the end of this year, which I thought it was going to, by making $1,900,000. Inconsistencies and not having a consistent, we know we're gonna do $1 million this month and 900,000 this month, you know, when it might be 700 and then we might go up and down, up and down. A lot of people don't like that. A lot of investors don't like that kind of up and down. So again, I do think A Beautiful Noise will close next year. I don't think soon, like in the first few months. It's not in a dire place, but business-wise, it's just kind of all over the place, and I don't think it's going to do very good in the next 2 months. Back to the Future went from 91% to 91.41%, and $1,338,114 to $1,364,938, a behemoth of a musical. I don't know how it's I mean, I know why it's doing so well, but like, really? This is what audiences want. Back to the Future, the musical. Decline of culture, guys. And again, I don't want it to close, but you know what? I listen to the music, it's very generic, and it's everything that is bad with musicals, with modern musicals these days. Still don't want it to close. I wish that everyone was in a better show. I know I come off as a hater of it, and I guess I kind of am, but I just don't like it. I think artistically it's terrible. Gutenberg went from 91% to 94% and making $1 million, and that is a limited engagement that's closing next month. Hadestown went from 96% to 97%, 704K to 764K. And again, I think it managed to, like, survive, and Jordan proved that he can bring in a little bit of box office. So I'm happy that it's not closing. But again, with how poorly it's done this past year, it kind of needs to be doing more than 700,000. I need to see an 8 in front of it, at least, at the minimum. And again, I think that, when these stunt casting people leave, it's gonna go back to where it was. And I think Jordan Fisher, while a good celebrity, isn't enough to maintain consistent numbers as the run goes on. We will see. I don't want it to close. I just looked at the business side of it, and business-wise, it did very bad in 2023. It just did. So even if it doesn't close this year, or even next year, it's running out of steam, and when producers bring in celebrities, it means that the show isn't doing so hot. So if you're a fan of Hadestown, go and see it again. Hamilton made 100% capacity to 101 this week, and 1,824 this week's 1,988,477. Harmony went from 61% to 58%, and 594K to 543K. Can we just close this show already? It's not doing well, and I looked at how it's doing tonight. It's doing really bad. I just don't see how this makes it in the next 2 months. If I'm a producer, I'm like, we're not improving, let's close it. I feel like producers don't close things early enough. They don't have the balls to do it. But, like, Harmony is not going to get a Best Musical win, so it's not worth keeping on. And again, it is in that 500K area where they can justify it, but I'm just thinking about the next 2 months and with how many musicals are coming in this spring, and there's a lot, it's a packed season, the smart move is to close it. How to Dance in Ohio, another thing that I think needs to close. It went from 87% to 69% this week, and 308K to 364K. And again, terrible numbers, and especially with how it did in the Times and how it's selling now. Just end it. Just close it on a high note. It's not going to get a Best Musical win. It's just not. There's so many more musicals coming in, and it's going to lose. It's going to bleed money in the next 2 months. And yeah, it could improve in the spring, but with musicals that do this bad, this early on, they don't get better. And again, this isn't me being arrogant or thinking I know more than you guys. I've just been watching the grosses for like almost 10 years now, and I see patterns, I recognize patterns, I see what works and what doesn't, and based on my experience, you could say, How to Dance in Ohio is not going to get any better. There are obscurities, like Beetlejuice, for example. There are times, and again, they could push it out like The Prom did, and The Prom was doing poor, but even The Prom, which was not a good, which was an amazing musical, but did bad business-wise, still made almost $1 million over the Christmas week. So that musical did bad, but it was doing somehow better than stuff like How to Dance in Ohio, Kimberly Akimbo. And speaking of Akimbo, also doing really, really bad, going from 76% to 77%, and 546K to 528K. And again, I don't know how this musical is still going on. Again, no show that's making under $700,000 is doing good. Maybe at the beginning if you're doing 5s and 6, but like for Akimbo, and if you've watched the videos, you know, Best Musical, and the fact that it's performing to this level is very underwhelming, and with how much money they lost, I don't know how they can afford this anymore. So I don't know. It's gonna close sometime, I think, between January and June of 2024, and that's, again, I would love it. I'm so happy it's still going on. I want it to go on forever, but business-wise, time to cut the cord. Merrily We Roll Along went from 100% to 100%, and 1,923,742 to 1,932,241. Moulin Rouge went from 99.55 to 99.60, and 1,463,558 to 1,531,385. So that is doing spectacular. Shucked, and that's closing, went from 90% to 91%, and 830K to 885K. And an interesting article that was put out by Broadway, interviewed the producer of Shucked, and he was basically saying, to summarize it, it just didn't hit with audiences the way we wanted it to, and maybe just focusing the marketing on the corn was the wrong move, because people didn't know how to describe it. And how, yes, I guess their average, like, gross was like 740,000, I think. But they lost so much money doing previews, and they only just started making money during the Tonys, and then the summer happened, and they weren't doing what they were expecting to do, which was like 8s and 9s and $1 million, and it was doing 7s and 6s. And then it had majorly, the big thing was, while it was doing 7s and 6s, it had huge decreases from week to week in September and October. And I guess they knew they were going to close in September. So that must have meant that they looked at the advanced sales and been like, yeah, this isn't worth it. But regardless of that, the reason why I think that musicals like Shucked don't work is because these kind of musicals are not connecting with audiences, and quite frankly, especially if they're original, they're just not going to hit. It's all about time and place. Sometimes one thing's going to hit in 2000, but it's not going to hit in 2023. And sometimes something's not going to hit in 2000, but it's going to hit in 2023. 2023. And we have a plethora of examples. Shucked, Tootsie, Some Like It Hot, The Prom, of musicals that are very traditional musical comedy, dance numbers, jazz, hands, and audiences just don't want that, and a great comparison is Tootsie and Beetlejuice. Very similar shows, but Beetlejuice was the modern kind of musical comedy with edgier jokes, and it was more current, and had a more pop score, and it was Broadway, but like in a cool way, if you get what I mean. And shows like Beetlejuice is what's working, and shows like Tootsie just aren't working. The marketplace isn't gonna accept it, and that's what Mr. Saturday Night, another example. These kind of musicals just don't work with audiences. I think we've been proven that enough over the past couple of seasons. We need to stop making these musicals. Well, not stop making them, just don't bring them to New York City, because they're gonna follow the same pratfalls, and that's that these kind of musicals are not working. You know, in the producers Spamalot era of musicals, would have done much better, but we're not in that era. You know, like we would, you know, in the 2015 or 2020s, it was David Hansen, it was the Hamiltons, it was the Band's Visits, Kimberly Akimbo's. Like, those are the musicals that like people want to see, and I know Kimberly Akimbo isn't doing well, and we've also got into the culture of IP musicals and brand musicals, and that's what people are seeing now, and we're now seeing a switch over from like the prestige musical to the IP musicals like Back to the Future. But regardless, you have to look at the marketplace. And the marketplace is too competitive, it's too cutting, and it's not got enough space for musicals like Shucked. And that's the honest-to-God truth. They're not going to like to hear that, and they're going to continue to make musicals like that. But pure and simply, that's what it is. Six made $1 million, and went from 1 million last week to 1,118,152 this week, and 93% to 97%. Some Like It Hot went from 964K to 951K, going from 79% to 80%, and while the capacity is weak, it is making over its weekly gross, so it is ending on a good note. Spamalot went from 72% to 76%, and 850K to 918K. Beautiful numbers for Spamalot. Yeah, the capacity is weak, but the overall gross is exactly where it needs to be. Obviously, it's doing better than a lot of new musicals or some things that are running currently, so it's not going anywhere. Sweeney went from 99% to 99%, and 1,845,284 to 1,823,727. And those are the grosses. Oh, but wait, many of you ask, why don't I do Book of Mormon, The Lion King, Wicked's numbers? That's because these musicals continuously make $1 million to $2 million a week, and they do high 90% capacity, so I don't see a reason to go over those, because it stays the same week to week. That is the grosses for this week. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.